Oh, good morning, everybody, and welcome to Guarantee RV August RV Seminar. This month is RV Basics, sort of. My name is Dan Edgecombe. I'm the weekend guy here at Guarantee RV. This week, Dave Taylor is not with us as he has prior obligations. And so this is just me, and I'm going to get a little off the reservation this week and talk about a few things that I like to talk about, things that we kind of let go. The whole point of these seminars is to share some of our experiences with our customers and people just starting to understand what they've gotten into when they bought an RV. I take a lot of questions, but unfortunately you'll have to email them to me, but I'm here all weekend and I can answer them. So I'm going to divert just slightly. I got notes because I haven't really done this before like this. The first thing I want to talk about, I get this when people buy a coach, a motorhome, or a trailer or a fifth wheel, one of the first things that they want to know is, for motorhomes, how often do I change my oil? And if you have a pickup and or a tow vehicle and you're just starting to tow, the question is how does that affect my changing the oil? So let's start with the trailers and fifth wheels first. If you buy a fifth wheel or a trailer and you start towing it, you're going to be using the vehicle harder. Now, pickups, they have a mileage interval. SUVs have a mileage interval, and they're all over the place, anywhere from 3,500 to 10,000 miles, depending on the vehicle. I can't quote times for tow vehicles because they're all different. The one thing I can tell you is if you start towing and using it heavier, increase your oil changes accordingly. If the basic is once a year, because you're not using it that much, at least once a year. Don't let the oil get older than 1 year. If your vehicle says 5,000 miles and you're getting ready to go on a 5,000 mile trip, change the oil before you go. Drive it around the block afterwards, make sure there's no leaks, and just do an extra oil change. It's not that much money, and it's very good for the engine. It'll make it last longer. It'll help it run cooler. It's just a good thing. On motorhomes, it's pretty much the same thing. If you have a newer diesel motorhome with a Cummins engine in it, Cummins is at 15,000 miles per oil change or once a year. And again, motorhomes don't get a lot of mileage racked up, so we end up just doing it once a year. And a gas motorhome, Ford V10, they're very strict about that. They were very adamant about 5,000 miles per oil change or once a year until about 2017, and then they said, with our new oil and the better engine, that new V10 is an excellent engine, by the way. They moved it to 7,500 miles or 1 year. Mercedes on the Sprinter chassis, they used to be 15,000, but now since I think 09 or 10, they've gone to 20,000 miles. Now, some people like us are a little uncomfortable with that. I would stick with a 15, but the owner's manual is the Bible, and it says 20,000 miles. or 2 years. That's your decision. But the bottom line is once a year for all these other vehicles, and the engine's made in America. The big thing is the quality of the oil. I grew up with paraffin-based wax oils that would get thick, and they would basically harden into a paste on the side of the valve cover and the side of the oil pan. And then we moved to SFE grades, and they were a good basic oil. They would last 2,000 miles. Then we started getting into the synthetics and then the synthetic blends. And I'd like to explain a little bit of the difference between a basic oil, a synthetic oil, and a blend. Basic oil is a refined oil right out of the ground, and it's the parameters of the molecule size is pretty wide. So you can have a lot of different size molecules in that oil, and what that translates is when you're on the downstroke in the engine and that connecting rod is forcing that crank to turn around, there's a lot of pressure on that bearing. And oil acts like ball bearings. And if all these little ball bearings are different sizes, a lot of them, the bigger ones carry the load, the little ones are just kind of floating along. The bigger ones then break down. And that's what causes the failure of these oils. Those bigger molecules break down and then break down, and pretty soon a good majority of the oil has broken down. When you get into a synthetic oil, what they do is they take a oil like rapeseed, or there's different ways they get it, and there's a process for filtering regular oil. But the goal is to have all the molecules in that oil the same size, so that these little ball bearings all carry the same amount of weight, and then they don't break down. And this is very important, and it was developed for jet engines, because when the fan and turbo blade props were spinning at high RPM and high heat, they needed an oil that could stand up to that, where the regular oils couldn't. So they developed synthetic oil. One of the traits of synthetic oil is it's hydrophilic. That means that it likes water. So if you have a very, very nice motorhome that you're not using very often, and it sits over the winter, moisture from condensation is going to collect in that crankcase, and it's going to hang out with the oil, which is not good. In the regular oils that come from refineries, same place gasoline and all the other stuff comes from, that oil is hydrophobic. It does not like water, so it'll shed that water, and it gets passed out into the positive crankcase ventilation, or into the oil filter, or it's just sweat out of the engine. So they have found that synthetic blend oils have a good portion of synthetic molecules that are all the same size, and then your base oil, which is a good quality 30 weight oil. Most of the molecules are about the same size. Synthetic blends have almost as much lubricating capacity as a pure synthetic, but they are hydrophobic. Now, if you're a truck driver, or if you drive your SUV or your pickup every day to work, you don't care about hydrophobic, because the engine's not sitting. Then you can use pure synthetic and it won't be a problem. But when you have an engine that sits for a long period of time, you want to make sure that it's hydrophobic, it's not absorbing oils. So if you're getting ready to go on a long 5,000-mile trip around the U.S., which I understand is just amazing, you want to make sure you put a synthetic oil in it. If you're just going to go here and there every 3 or 4 weeks, put a blend in there. Don't put synthetic, because that's going to cause some problems down the road. One of the questions that we get quite a bit of, especially with the Sprinter chassis, because Mercedes has made, well, did make back years ago, about 5 years ago, they made a big deal out of the 5% sulfur in the fuel. There is no such thing as 5% sulfur in America. Everything is 10% or better. And if you read the sticker on a lot of the gas pumps, it says, you know, something close to 10%, but they're not specific. Some of these are 15 to 20%. So the question is if Mercedes is requiring 5% sulfur or less fuel, and it's not available in America, what do? If you use 10% or 20% or 15%, whatever is at your local gas station to pull into, what's that going to do to your warranty? Cummins, who is the #1 supplier to engines for diesel pushers and Freightliner and Oshkosh and Spartan chassis, they say they don't really care. They'd like to see, but they know reality. Mercedes, on the other hand, they were really sticklers for a while, but what it all comes down to, and this is what you need to understand, and we've been through this now enough. Mercedes has gotten their behinds kicked. If you historically have used 15 to 20% sulfur fuel, and you take it into the Mercedes dealer because you're having your engine issues or check engine light or something, there's a problem. They cannot come back on you and say, you're using high sulfur fuel, we will not cover this. What will happen is Mercedes is going to say, you are heavily sulfured in your engine, so we're going to charge you $350 to desulfate your engine. Clean your injectors and all of your parts that hold the sulfur. We're going to clean that out. You're going to pay for that. And then we will pay for whatever the warrantable repair is. And even if the sulfur was to be the cause, which it wouldn't be, they have to cover that. So in the last couple of years, we really haven't had an issue with that. But I think that people need to understand, especially with Mercedes, buy the best fuel, diesel fuel you can. Get in the habit of checking that sulfur content. And certain gas stations always sell better quality diesel. And it is not imperative, but it is to your best interest to buy the best diesel that you can get. And it may be 10% more, but in the long run, it's better for your engine. Next, I'd like to talk about transmissions. We have two kinds. We've got Allison, and then we've got everybody else. If you have a Mercedes, they have a strict timetable for having them do a service. And I'll tell you right now that if you bring your used Mercedes chassis motorhome to us, we will not do a transmission service. If it is under warranty, we will not touch anything. If it's out of warranty, we'll change your oil, if you really want us to, but we will not do a training service. That has to be done with Mercedes. The same with Allison Transmissions. Number one, if you have an Allison transmission, the big ones on diesel pushers and like the one in a Chevy or GMC pickup, the Allison 1000, those have a 200,000 mile mileage for a complete service. And that has to be done by Allison. Every 50,000 miles, you change the filter on the Allison. It's like a quart oil filter. And then you add the quart of Allison transmission fluid. And it has to be Allison. We won't do that either if it's under warranty. If it's an older coach, yeah, if we need to, we will, but there's not that much, it's not that big a deal. And it's just best that Allison does it. They do the oil change or oil filter change, and they check different parameters in the engine transmission, the way the computers work, and they test the oil so you know if you've got any clutch problems or anything like that. But you don't change your Allison transmission fluid like you would, let's say you have a Ford V10. That E4OD is a great transmission. The newer version is a 5 and 6 speeds, great transmissions. We recommend that you change your transmission fluid every 25,000 miles. Drop the pan, drain it out, put a filter in it, put the pan on it. We do that if you're out of your warranty for Ford, but we don't like to do it if you're in warranty. Just to make sure, just to be safe. But sometimes Ford gets a little bit kinky with their warranty. You just need to be able to document where you had your, just have a receipt where you had your oil change, where you had your transmission fluid serviced, changed. That way you can show them that you've maintained the vehicle. They don't, a lot of times, if, let's say you pull in and you're way past due an oil change and you've had an internal failure. Ford's going to make a big effort to prove to you that it was lack of your maintenance that caused the failure. If you have been maintaining it and you have the receipts from Joe's Garage or whoever, they're not going to have anywhere to go. And it's a little more money to have somebody else do it, but that receipt is gold. If you have, in that first 5 years, if you have any kind of a failure that is something that they will warranty, those receipts will save you absolutely. I would ask if anybody has any questions, but don't have anybody. So, the next thing I want to talk about is DEF. DEF is a fluid for the exhaust systems that they've started putting on diesels since 2008. If it's pre-2008, it's not going to have a incinerator type exhaust system. So what these systems do is they look at the amount of soot coming out of the engine, the diesel engine. And if it's over a certain period or a certain point, then this little incinerator comes in. It's like a jet engine. And it uses DEF to burn the soot, which is carbon. And it incinerates it at an ultra high temperature. So when it blows out the exhaust pipe, it's incinerated that. And so it's more just carbon dioxide and it's not a lot of particulate material. We have found that if you have a vehicle that you stop and go a lot with, which is a diesel, it's going to consume a lot of depth. It's going to soot up that exhaust system. The engine's going to soot up, and it's like blow it out. When we were younger, we used to say, well, you just got to get it out on the highway and blow it out a little bit and clean it up. Well, that's basically what's going on. So let's say you've got an 07, or I'm sorry, how about an 09 Dodge Cummins, great engine, and you commute about 40 miles and you drive it every day. You probably won't burn a gallon of DEF a year. If you have the same truck and you're in and out of traffic for a half hour to an hour every day, you're going to consume a lot of DEF. And so where I'm going with this is the guys that just bought a Sprinter chassis, they say, well, how often do I fill it? It just all depends on how you drive the vehicle. If you're on the highway a lot, you won't hardly see it at all, because you're going 55, 65 miles an hour in a diesel. It's working, but it's free-flowing exhaust and high temperatures at those RPMs is keeping the exhaust system clean, and the combustion is a lot more efficient. So you're not going to get a lot of partially incinerated fuel in the form of soot. So driving at highway speeds, you're not going to consume much DEF. Putting around town, doing your shopping, this and that, you're going to consume a lot of So anyway, you just have to have some on hand, and better to have a jug than having to go try and find it. We sell it. A lot of different places sell it. It's pretty common. You don't have to go to anything specific, any car parts shop. They all have it. It's pretty close. It's no big deal. It's cheap. Excuse me. These things. You talk at them much. It's tough. I'd like to move on to something that I like to talk about quite a bit, is tires. When times get tough, people start cutting back on their maintenance and that. And we're starting to see that a little bit this year. People are not replacing their tires, and so that they get a blowout. It seems like every weekend just about I get a call from somebody out on the highway. I need to have my vehicle towed into your shop. They had a flat tire, took out the side of their coach. And that's just been something that this spring and summer we've seen, and really a big increase. So what the issue is, these tires, when they sit, they develop a flat spot, and it causes the cords to separate on that flat spot where you're sitting. You get up and start rolling, and you get a thump. And if the tire's in good shape, that thump will work itself out when the tire warms up. But at some point when they get old, or if they've been sitting for a couple of years, that flat spot's not going to work out. So you're going down the road going thump, 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 boom. If we have a rule of thumb, if a trailer has sat for 2 years, a motorhome has sat for 2 years without moving, you got to replace the tires, because they just don't work. And you can put some cheap tires on it. You know, they don't have to be the $1,300 Michelins. You can put some cheaper tires on it. And if you're not using it that much, there's not much need in spending a lot of money on the most expensive tires. One thing that we have found is in motorhomes, if you buy tires, get stiffer sidewalls. Otherwise, the steering gets really squirrely. If you're interested in the best suspension, then you gotta have something like a Goodyear. That's like the best. They have a really firm sidewall, and you don't have a lot of wander and front tire wobble when the sidewall's rolling over. Bridgestone is another really good one. A lot of people say Toyos are good, and I love Toyos, but they're brutal. They're a truck tire, and you don't want your dash, the dust bouncing off the dash 2 inches up because they're so hard. And some of these roads, it's pretty easy to do that. So the industry says 8 to 9 years. The government, some people say 7 years. On the side of your tire, where it gives all of the descriptions and that, there is one stamp there. It's in an oval, and there's 4 numbers. And those 4 numbers are week, year. So let's say it's 4217. So what that means is this tire was made on the 42nd week of 2017. And it probably got installed in your motorhome in 2018 when you bought it brand new. So you know that 8 or 9 years, you're going to have to replace tires. Now, if you're out buying a used motorhome and it's 6 years old, if the original tires, they're probably 7 years old and they're right on the line of getting replaced, plus they've saddled out. It is a non-existent thing for people in the RV industry to wear their tires out. They age out, they don't wear out. It's sad, but it's true. And you got these beautiful tires and they look great. They got all sorts of tread length. But you know, your life is worth more than those tires. And those tires, they will separate, they will fail. We get that all the time. If you're looking for a used one, and it's 6, 7 years old, if they're not new tires, they're outdated, and that's a safety issue. And while we're talking about that, I want to make this other comment. When you check your tires, or you torque on a fifth wheel or a trailer, when you torque your lug nuts, it says to do it every 250 miles once you pick it up. But here's the deal. What they want to know, what we need to know, if you have 4 tires, and 3 of them, you check it every 250 miles, 3 of them never change. 1 of them is low pressure every time. You can stop checking the other one so much, but you need to address what the problem is with that other one. It could be a bad rim, it could be a bad tire, there could be some debris in the seat where they mounted it. It may just need to be taken off and remounted. But you just need to check your tire pressure until you determine, okay, they're not going anywhere. So then instead of doing it then, do it just before you go on a trip, every 6 months. You don't need to check them all the time, and every time you check them, you lose a little air pressure. Once you establish the fact that the tires are holding air, you don't need to do it all the time. Just once in a while. Same with torquing the wheels. If you torque the wheels and one of the wheels always seems to be needing to be retorqued, that tells us that rim is flexing and there's something wrong with that rim. So we have to warranty out that rim, exchange that rim, and then you check it a couple times, it holds pressure, you're good to go. But once we establish a pattern, you don't need to check it all the time. And then the one last thing about tires, if you can afford to buy an RV, you can afford road service. People ask me all the time, well, where's my jack? Where's my spare in a motorhome? Well, you don't get one. And the reason is back in the early 80s, I think maybe 82 or 84, everybody was providing a little tiny bottle jack with their motorhome. And this guy had a flat, he had a Fleetwood product. He was down in Mexico and they didn't have much of a shoulder. And he got out there and he jacked up his motorhome with that little tiny bottle jack. And he got under there to change his tire and it slipped off and crushed him, killed him. Huge lawsuit. So from that time on, nobody has provided jacks. And on Class A's and Class C's, you just never see a spare. Sometimes on a Class C, obviously on a trailer or a fifth wheel, yeah, they're not so heavy, the littler ones, that a guy could change his own tire. But on the motorhomes, no such thing. So anyway, if you're going to be going somewhere like Alaska, up the Alcan Highway, which is amazing, everybody needs to do it. Take a tire, not a rim, just take a tire. Let's say you're halfway there, and you have a blowout. There is information along the way. If you have a problem, call this number, and they will connect it to a tire guy, an engine guy, whoever, to do that. So if you need a tire, the guy comes out, the road service comes out to change your tire. If he has a tire, well, if you have a tire, he just knocks the bad one off, puts the new one on, puts it back on. Let's say you don't have a spare tire, he has to go back to Whitehorse or wherever, Fairbanks, and get a tire, and then come back down. So now it's 2 weeks, 2 trips, and a ton of money. There you sit. If you had a tire, you could come out one time, swap it out, you could go on your way. It's a lot less money. So if you're going to do something like that, get a tire. But if you're just going here to New York, if something happens, the local tire company can take care of you with no problem. So no spares, no jack. Absolutely not. You're too valuable to crawl under there and get crushed. One last comment on oil, and that's for the generators. We see this quite a bit. Generators get used for 20 minutes here, 20 minutes there, an hour there. You need to run your generator, according to ONIN, 2 hours every month. That way you don't have carburetor failures, which is the most common thing out there. And it keeps the thing running. And then you need to change the oil once a year. If you get upwards of 100 hours on it, then change the oil. Changing the oil is the one thing that is the difference between a generator that fails at 1,000 hours and a generator that fails at 6,000 hours. And we see them both, and it's all the oil change. Change the oil. I want to talk now about something that the industry, I shake my head at. Especially in the towables, they're talking about the roof, and they say, yeah, we've got the greatest roof. It's got a 10-year warranty. Well, that's not true. The rubber material back in the 90s, when the ethylene polydimorphic rubber, the EPDM rubber, first started coming out, people were unsure of it, so they put a 10-year warranty on it and said, yeah, this is great stuff. But the truth of the matter is, the roof has basically a 3-month warranty. And what they're warranting is the materials, like the rubber, and then you've got the 1-year structure of the coat. The big issue is the seals. Most manufacturers, when you bring it in the first time, shakedown issues, list of this and that. At 3 months, you check it, and if it needs, the roof has a couple voids that need to be sealed, the manufacturer will pay for that. Newmar will do 6 months. Sometimes Winnebago will do 6 months. Everybody else will go 3 months, if they do anything at all. It is the responsibility of the owner to either bring it into a dealer like us and have us inspect them. We don't charge to inspect your roof seals. We do charge to seal them if we find something, but we also give you the opportunity to fix it yourself. You come in, we do an inspection, we give you some pictures of what we saw, and then you get with me and I can explain to you the sealants and how to do it and what to use and how to use it and all of that, so that you can maintain that rubber roof show. This is very important because I grew up in this industry, and I grew up in the rain capital of the world. And the one thing that can destroy the value of an RV faster than anything else is water. Water intrusion, rot, especially if you've got a wood frame trailer, God help you. And so keeping that roof in good condition is a very important thing. Cover it up. If you park it a lot of the year, put a cover or RV cover over it. They're $250. I've had my trailer covered for 8 years now, and I just bought my second cover. If you put them on and you snug them down, they've got corset ties on them, and they're not flapping around, they'll last a long time. When you take them off, if they're wet, just kind of fold them up and put them back in the shop. If it's dry, wad them up. When you get ready to put it back on, pull it out, pull it over your RV. It'll dry then. If you get the aquajet type that are designed for rain, they breathe. So if you put the cover on your RV when it's wet, 2 weeks later it'll be dry inside because the moisture will evaporate and it will pass through the cover. And you don't get that on a tarp, and the tarps chafe, but a good RV cover will take good care of your coat. Better yet would be a metal cover, and there are people around here that install those things. I have one of those, and they're really nice. They're very nice. They do a good job. The next thing is, years ago, when most of our stuff was wood frame, or things were more patched together instead of solid wall, we used to give people a tube of Carbon, and we always, during these seminars, we show you what it looks like. And we tell them, just go around and seal everything. Seal around your lights, seal around your vents, seal around anything on your sides, around your windows, around your compartment doors, because on the corner molding, because anything you can do to keep moisture out of that frame will keep your trailer or fifth wheel or camper in much better condition. And that brings me to why I am such a stickler on the kind of material that we need to use on these RVs. This is a lap sealant designed by the Dicor Corporation, which is the people that make the rubber roof for your coach. When this is in the tube, it's a liquid. And it's a liquid because there's what's called a carrier solvent in this sealant. That carrier solvent is what allows you to be able to caulk it out, pump it out, and it's a liquid. That carrier solvent then evaporates as this cures. But that carrier solvent also is designed to etch the rubber so that the sealant can grip it. So you say, well, this is $15 and I can go to Jerry's and get some DAP on sale for $2.99. The problem is, I'm sorry, I can't read. The problem is the DAP has carrier solvents that are too aggressive for the rubber roof. They will, instead of etching it, they will destroy the rubber. And it turns the rubber into kind of like cottage cheese. And that's not a good thing. So, again, I love Jerry's, but that's not the right way to take care of the roof. You have to have, and everybody, all the RV industry sells these things, these specific sealants for specific applications. We don't use much silicone in our industry, except for around the tub surrounds. Everything else is very specific. If you come to us, there's parts people and myself available. We can walk you through what sealants to use. Yes, they're more money, but they're not going to destroy or damage the outside of your RV. The manufacturers tell you to inspect your roof and seal any voids or cracks every 6 months. And we stand by that 100%. We do free roof inspections. A lot of people do. We will show you how to do it, tell you how to do it, or we will do it for you, which is a lot more. Last thing I want to talk about before I get into some of the normal stuff is your sanitation, your especially with this COVID-19 thing. People are really tuned in about health and safety. It's your freshwater system, and especially your water heater, are horrible as far as bacteria and growth, algae and things. These things live in that system. And I grew up in Idaho, and as a younger person, I worked at a dealer in Idaho, and we would bring used units in. And it was just gross what was growing inside a freshwater system. So once a year, you need to put some bleach in your potable tank. And bleach is cheap. I would say a quart or two. And then add about 10 gallons of water. Slosh it around a little bit, and then pump it through your whole system so that you've got this bleach water going through all your lines, up through your faucets, into your water heater, throughout your freshwater system. And let it sit for a day or so. Let that bleach kill all the bacteria. And then pump it out. And then vinegar does a really good job countering the bleach odor and taste. And so do the same thing with bleach. Put whatever couple quarts in you use in bleach, put vinegar in there. It can be just cheap red vinegar, doesn't have to be anything fancy. And then another 10 gallons of water, pump it in there and let it sit for a few hours, overnight, whatever. And then flush it out. Flush it out meaning drain it, fill the water system, and let the pump run till the tank is empty. Now you've used bleach to kill everything, vinegar to neutralize the bleach, and then you rinsed it out. Now you've got a sweet system. For those of you that have watched this before, you know I push this all the time. In your water heater, there is a drain pick, but unfortunately it's not quite at the bottom. And so the water heater ends up being the collector, the garbage dump for any hard water, any bacteria, any algae, any growth, anything that's gotten into your freshwater system. The water heater is now the garbage dump, the collection. So you take that drain plug out and you get this little wand, hook it on your hose, stick it in there, and blast it out. And you do this when there's no water in the coach. And don't stand right in front of the drain when you're doing this because you'll wear it. So stand off to the side and take the drain out. And don't do it somewhere if you're on pretty brick pavement or something. Do it somewhere out in the grass or something because there's got to be a lot of crap that comes out. We do this a lot, and when the guys do it, they'll back it out of the shop on the asphalt, and you'll have a 10 or 12 foot fan of hard water deposits and gunk. And once in a while the guys will get the other guys in the shop and say, oh my God, come and look at this. Look what was in here. And so then we use this to flush it out. We get all of that out of there. A good indicator that you need to do this is if your water smells funny. And if you've been south a lot, there's a lot of sulfur and a lot of hard water deposit in there. That hard water can crystallize, and you get that in your faucets and your drain traps. And, I remember one time working on a coach a long time ago. It was like there was sand in all of the faucets everywhere from the hard water. And we had to take everything apart and rinse all the sand, this hard water deposit out. And it had kind of put a glaze on the faucet components, and it was that bad. So, bottom line, flush your system once a year, rinse your water heater out at least once a year, because if there's bacteria or bad germs in that system, it's going to be in the water heater. Do this. Very important. And these are cheap, and it's easy. Before I quit talking about your plumbing system, these are just basic filters. It's got a little bitty hose on it with a strain relief, so it comes out of the hose bib. It takes the strain off of the hose, and then you hook this up, and then you run it from here to your coach. These kind of filters, they just take the big chunks out. They don't get out Montezuma's Revenge or any of the big stuff, important stuff, but they do take the big chunks out so you don't have that hard water deposit and that in your coach. People ask me all the time, well, how do you know when it's time to replace it? Well, you get to know your coach and you know what your water flow is. Okay, all of a sudden the water flow starts to slow down. Well, I'm not getting much water out of it. Put a new filter in. They're not a lot of money. They do a very good job. If you want a special filter for the kitchen sink, you can install a filter at the cold water for the kitchen sink, and that'll take everything out. Or you can get a portable, which is what we do. If you do one of the big canister types, and you put the microporous filters in it, you're just going to be replacing filters all the time. And you don't need to have the cleanest water when you flush the toilet, not have to need the cleanest water when you take a shower and that. But for consumption, you do need that clean water. So just a basic filter is an absolute. Beyond that, that's up to you. So now I kind of want to get back into the RV basics a little bit and talk about one of my best topics is batteries. Every RV needs batteries. The 12-volt systems need batteries to power the RV. All your control modules for your slides, your monitors, your appliances, all of the controls are 12 volt. So if you have a problem with your batteries, you have a problem with your system. And so batteries are important. When I grew up in this, we all were using a flooded cell battery, which was lead plate and sulfuric acid solution, and the reaction was lead and sulfur to lead sulfate and electricity. The old batteries, you had to check the water level every few weeks and then put distilled water in it. People would use their Idaho well water, and then their batteries would fail because there's so much junk in the water that it would settle to the bottom of the battery down in here, and it would short out the plates. So it's important to use distilled water in your flooded cell batteries. The newer batteries, the 12-volt battery, doesn't need that much maintenance, but the problem is they're only about 80 amp hours when they're brand new. And a 12-volt flooded cell deep cycle, a Group 24 battery, is what you get when you buy a travel trailer or fifth wheel. You buy a new motorhome on the house side, it's going to have wet cell, flooded cell batteries. They have Group 24s rated at 80 amp hours when it's brand new. 2 years later, it's probably only about 50 or 60 amp hours. They fail fairly fast. You have to maintain them, maintain the water level, make sure it's clean water, but they still don't last all that long, 3-4 years, and they're done. The better batteries, we start moving into the absorbed glass mat batteries, AGM. They have a lead plate and a fiberglass pouch, and then they impregnate that pouch with a electrolyte resin, and it's all just held right there in a sealed container. You can't maintain it. And they're a lot more durable battery. We talk duty cycles in batteries, and the wet cell 6-volt battery, you can get like 280, 250 cycles. Same 6-volt golf cart battery in an AGM, you're about 600, 800 duty cycles. They last a lot longer. They're 3 times as much money. But you don't maintain them. There's nothing you can do other than wipe them off once a year, get the dust and stuff off of them. They handle inverters and solar applications much better. They're just a better battery. And when you're done with your first battery, then you're on your coach. When you go to upgrade, put AGMs in there. You'll be very happy. Newer on the market is the Lithium Ion. Interesting. I was just thinking about this the other day, and one of the nice things is we're taking lead out of the environment, because lithium ion are basically diodes being controlled by a small printed circuit board. They're basically a 100 amp hour lithium ion battery is equivalent to, from our experience, 1.5 to 2 AGM batteries, just because of how they work and how they charge and just how they function. The lithium ion batteries have these capacitors, and they have a constant output. This one right now is half charged from being kicked around for a long time and played with, and it's still at 13.6. And what's happening is the printed circuit board opens up enough capacitors to discharge, so there is always a constant potential all the way up to the end of the same amount, about 13.5 volts. It's like your little lithium ion cordless drill, and I was building something a year or so ago and had this beautiful new drill, and I was it just went like crazy, then it went and that was it. It didn't kind of slow down like my other ones, it just stopped. And then I went in and got my other battery, all over again. They run it full output because they're controlled by a printed circuit board, but when they're empty, they're done. Boom. So there's some pros and cons to this lithium ion. The con, obviously, is the expense. The Battleborn, which is, in my opinion, the best thing out there for lithium ion, they're $1,000 now. And a year and a half ago now, something like that was $1,500–1,600. So they're coming down a little bit. And I'm sure they'll come down to where they're competitive with the AGMs. At that point, they'll take the market because this weighs 35 pounds, this weighs 90 pounds. They have the same performance. The lithium ion stays at the same voltage and it cuts off. A AGM starts at 12 and a half and it rolls off. And when it hits 11, I always have to ask Dave this. It's, I think, either 11.4 or 11.6. That battery's dead. I mean, the physical chemistry is, the energy has been consumed. The appliances stop functioning at about 11 volts. They don't recognize that. They won't work below 11 volts. All in all, the lithium ion gives you a very smooth power up until the very end. The AGM, it gently rolls off. The flooded cell is more like that. It's on a slide to hell. Pardon the French. It just, boom, it's an old technology. I'd ask you if you have any questions, but nobody's talking. There's anybody here. This is about it. I got a couple more little things, but that's about it. As far as roofer maintenance, I tell people what I prefer to do on my rubber roof. This is pretty neat stuff. Your rubber roof is black rubber. And they put a coating on that, a pigment, because black absorbs heat, so they make the pigment white. But what happens, it naturally sheds this pigment and it runs down the side of your coach. So you get these white streaks. And then you get the gray streaks. And the gray streaks are pollution. They call it industrial fallout. It's dirt, it's junk that's in the air. The rain brings it down. And right now it's harvest time at my house. So my new pickup is dirt brown because any moisture collects on all the dust and it just, boom, filthy. So the way to deal with that is to get up and pressure wash your coach. You don't want to drill any holes in the roof. Just keep your wand about 12 inches away and just pressure wash it. Don't try to bust off any sealants or anything. Just rinse it. And then put that Protectol, makes the better stuff. What this is it looks like shellac once it's been put on. You wash it, you clean it, let it dry, and then you just mop that stuff on. And when it dries, it looks like shellac. It's a light brown, thin film, and you don't walk on your roof when the roof is wet because that's slicker than crazy. It's just really slick. But what it does is it seals that rubber so that the top coating is sealed in. It can't shed itself. It has to stay there. So that eliminates the white streaks on the sides of your coach, and it allows the rubber to last all that much longer. Once you start losing all of that pigment, then the roof starts turning black, it's shot. You need to put a new membrane on there, and that can be $6,000 to $10,000. That's a lot of money to pull that up and lay a new one down. So good stuff, easy to do it once a year. Highly recommend that. I'd talk a little bit more about Dave and his poop, but we don't get paid to promote this stuff, but that's really good stuff. There's several different brands out there. This is just what really works in our water out here. Basically what it is an enzyme, and there's several of them on the market, so you pick whatever you want. The way to use it, the way I do it, and I think this is a good way. I have a camp bucket. When you go into the federal forest, you got to have a shovel, axe, and a bucket. So I take my bucket, and I put a couple scoops in it, fill it up, and I dump it down the toilet after I'm all done. And it sits in there. It could sit in there for 6 months. But the enzyme, let's say that it's in there, the humidity inside that tank is quite high. And so this enzyme is dissolved in the moisture in the water in there, and it gets on the walls, the probes, everywhere, and that enzyme starts eating the bacteria. And it also eats beta cellulose, and beta cellulose is the hard part of wood, or what they use in toilet paper and things like that. So these enzymes will eat any residual organic material, any tissue. When you load it, you go away for a few weeks and then you use it, it's going to be a lot cleaner. When you're all done, you dump the black tank, leave the black tank open, dump the gray tank. Gray tank comes out and kind of rinses out the black tank a little bit. Then what I do is I take a camp bucket and dump a couple gallons down my toilet with both valves open, and it rinses it out a lot better. Then I close both my valves, and then I put my bucket with 2 scoops in it and dump it down the toilet, and it stays there until next time I go camping. A lot of people ask, well, we went camping and we only used it a couple times. And I'm of the mind that I dump. Doesn't matter how much I got in there, because the enzymes just can't eat all of that stuff. I prefer to dump every time and reload it. It's just a little bit of a nuisance, not much. And when you're doing that, every 3 or 4 times, dump a load down your shower, and it'll go into the gray tank. And the gray tank has got all sorts of body oil, soap oil, all the stuff from the dishes, all of that's in the gray tank, and that gets to stinking just as bad as the black tank. So I highly recommend doing the gray tank every 3 or 4 times. You do your black tank. Good stuff. The last thing I want to talk about, I get this question a lot, and I had a guy call me up last night, as a matter of fact. He's going camping, and he wants to know if he can light his fridge and leave it on gas while he's going to cool down. And the answer is no. If the manufacturers, Norcold, Dometic, they all say you need to pre-cool your refrigerator 24 hours before you go, and then turn your appliance off. And that, I believe in that wholeheartedly. I don't know about the 24 hours. It'll start cooling. You'll start being able to notice the cooling after a couple hours. 8 hours into it, you're down to 0 in the freezer, and that's good. But if you could do it overnight, next morning, turn the appliance off, load it up with cold food, close the door. Both Dometic and Norcold will, in their paperwork somewhere, I've seen it several times, they will tell you that their cabinets are insulated well enough that if you pre-cool it for 24 hours, 8 hours later, with the power off, you will have only lost 2 to 3 degrees in the fridge. So the right way to do this is turn it on at least overnight, load it, turn it off, go to where you're going, set up, turn the appliance on. It may not be, the beer may be not frozen at that point, but by the time you're ready for your beer, it'll be good and full. And that's the way to use your appliance. The thing is number one, if you have a fifth wheel or a trailer and it's got the little cylinders, it is against federal law to tow that trailer down the road with those cylinders open. If you have a freight-mounted tank on a motorhome, it is legal to drive that motorhome down the road with the propane on. That way you can use your furnace to maintain a warm temperature when it's cold outside. That's it. The water heaters aren't going to work well with that much air blowing by the side of the coach. The refrigerators are absorption units, and the way they work is they take heat. You have ammonia, and you have hydrogen and a little bit of water, and you heat that ammonia and hydrogen up, and they make ammonium. And then you cool it down, you take the pressure off of it, and then it goes, you go through a pressure orifice, and that ammonium goes back to hydrogen and ammonia, but it needs energy, so it pulls that energy out of the cooling fins of your freezer, and then a little bit of your refrigerator. So that's how it works. It's in a cycle. So let's say that you're going 60 miles an hour, you've got this little flame on there trying to heat there's a boiler tube, they call it, and you're trying to heat that to get the ammonia and hydrogen hot enough to bond, to make ammonium and build pressure. You can't do it. So we see the people that try to do that. Number one, we see their ignition modules fail rapidly because they're always trying to ignite. And the other thing we see is the burners tend to get overheated and they fail. So the manufacturers tell you not to drive with your propane on your appliance. Now sometimes they will put out a three-way, but we used to do three-ways back in the 80s, but it was so hard on the charge system of the tow vehicles, the pickups, that they stopped doing it because the refrigerators were taking 20 to 30 amps almost constantly, depending on the size of the fridge, and it was just too hard on the electrical system. So they've gone away from that. Plus, it's the same efficiency issue that we had with gas. And the three-ways that are out there today, they will flat tell you in the manual that the 12-volt system is a maintenance only. So you pre-cool it, and then when you're ready to go, you turn it to 12-volt, and it'll sort of maintain it. I prefer just a two-way. Run it when you're sitting, turn it off when you're driving. It's important to make sure that your LP system is intact, whether you have a trailer, a motorhome, a fifth wheel camper, whatever. When you buy a coach, the seller, whether it's a private party or a dealership, they are required by law to do an LP system test. We do this, and I have found more often than, well, almost always, if you buy a coach from a private party, nobody knows it. No LP system has been tested. And that's a real danger because unlike my house, I have natural gas, but my house isn't moving. And it was built in the 50s and no leaks. Houses, propane, unless you've got a big earthquake, you're not going to have a problem with natural gas leaking in a house. RVs move constantly, even if they're just sitting. The wind blows, people walk around, they're moving, and things wiggle, and something's going to get loose. Now you've got an LP leak. It's good to have an LP test once a year. It is federal law to require a LP test when you buy a coach. I would do the 1 year absolutely, because people are surprised how often they come back with an LP leak. It's very important. If you have a fifth wheel trailer, camper, tent trailer, keep your propane off when you're going down the road. If you have a motorhome, keep it off unless you need it, just a safety thing. Even motorhomes have to turn off their propane if they're going on a ferry and a few other things. I don't know them all. I'm too old. Anyway, I think that's just about it. I hope you've enjoyed this. If you have questions, email us and I'll get back to you. We're going to do it again next month. I didn't realize how many people follow us on this online, but I'm happy to answer questions. If there's anything you want me to talk about, please let me know. With that, you guys have a great weekend. Thank you.